Michelle's day began like any other. She woke up before the alarm, made coffee, and checked her emails while standing by the kitchen counter. Nothing felt unusual. The morning light filled the apartment, soft and quiet, almost comforting. She had no idea that by sunset, everything she thought was stable would no longer exist. At work, the meeting invitation appeared suddenly on her screen. A short subject line. Mandatory attendance. She felt a knot in her stomach before she even stood up. The conference room was cold, and the smiles from management were tight and rehearsed. When the words were finally spoken, they landed heavily. Restructuring, budget cuts, position eliminated. Michelle nodded politely, as if she were hearing news about someone else. She packed her desk slowly, placing years of her life into a cardboard box. Coworkers avoided eye contact, unsure of what to say. By the time she reached the parking lot, the weight of it all settled in. That evening, she walked into her apartment and found Daniel waiting. His expression told her everything before he spoke. He said he felt lost, that he needed something different, that he didn't see a future together anymore. By the time he left, Michelle sat on the couch in silence, holding two losses she never expected to face on the same day. The apartment felt unfamiliar without Daniel's presence. The quiet was heavier than noise, pressing against Michelle's chest as she moved from room to room. She noticed small details she had ignored for years. A crack in the wall, a flickering light, the echo of her own footsteps. She sat on the bed and stared at the phone, unsure who to call. Friends had their own lives, their own problems. She didn't want pity. She didn't want advice. Mostly, she didn't know how to explain what she was feeling. Losing her job hurt, but losing the future she had imagined hurt more. At 40, she had believed she was done starting over. She had followed the rules, made careful choices, stayed when leaving felt scary. Now she wondered if safety had cost her happiness. Memories surfaced without warning. Early mornings, shared plans, promises, spoken casually but taken seriously. She opened her laptop and searched job listings, then closed it again. The thought of interviews and rejection felt exhausting. Instead, she poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the city lights come alive. For the first time in years, Michelle allowed herself to admit the truth. She was afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of failing. Afraid that this was all there was. Yet, beneath the fear, something else stirred quietly. A sense that this emptiness, as painful as it was, might also be space. A few days later, Michelle met her friend Laura for coffee. The cafe buzzed with conversation, a sharp contrast to the silence Michelle had been living in. Laura listened carefully, asking few questions, letting Michelle speak at her own pace. When Michelle finished, Laura leaned forward and said something simple but unexpected. "What if this is your chance?" The words lingered. Chance? Not failure. Not ending. A beginning. Michelle laughed softly at first, dismissing the idea. She was tired. She didn't have the energy to rebuild her life from scratch. But on the walk home, the thought followed her. What if staying meant slowly disappearing? That night, she opened a map and looked at cities she had once dreamed about. One, in particular, stood out. Smaller, slower, different. The idea scared her, which made her pay attention. She imagined mornings that didn't feel heavy, a routine that wasn't built around what she had lost. She imagined herself unknown, undefined, free from expectations. By midnight, Michelle had made a quiet decision. She would leave, not because she was running away, but because she wanted to move towards something she couldn't yet name. The fear didn't disappear, but it softened, making room for resolve. The city greeted Michelle with unfamiliar streets and crisp air. Her new apartment was small, with mismatched furniture and a view of a brick wall, but it felt honest. Nothing there reminded her of who she used to be. The first days were disorienting. She walked without direction, discovered a grocery store on the corner, learned the sound of traffic outside her window. Simple routines became anchors, morning walks, coffee at the same cafe, evenings spent unpacking memories carefully. People were polite but distant, and Michelle found comfort in that. There was no pressure to explain herself. She was just another woman starting over, unnoticed, and free. At night, exhaustion replaced anxiety. She slept deeply, dreaming less about the past and more about nothing at all. The quiet no longer felt threatening. It felt neutral, open. Slowly, she began to breathe differently. Her shoulders relaxed. Her thoughts slowed. She wasn't happy yet, but she wasn't drowning either. In the unfamiliar rhythm of the city, Michelle sensed the first fragile signs of balance. Reality returned quickly. Michelle updated her resume and began applying for jobs. Interviews followed, each one polite but discouraging. Overqualified, underqualified, not the right fit. Each rejection chipped away at her confidence. She questioned her value, her relevance, her timing. Starting from zero felt heavier than she had imagined. She compared herself to younger candidates and wondered if the world had already moved on without her. Still, she kept going. She adjusted her expectations, considered roles she once overlooked. Pride softened into practicality. She learned to accept temporary discomfort without attaching it to her worth. One afternoon, she received an offer. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. She accepted without hesitation, feeling a quiet sense of victory. That night, she allowed herself a small celebration, not because everything was fixed, but because she hadn't given up. Work introduced Michelle to new faces and small conversations that slowly grew familiar. One coworker invited her to lunch. The barista began remembering her order. The city started to recognize her. At the cafe, she met James. Their conversations were easy, unforced. No history, no expectations, just shared moments and laughter that surprised her. She noticed how different this felt. Lighter, safer. She didn't rush to define it, choosing instead to enjoy the present. For the first time in a long while, Michelle felt open. As the connection deepened, fear surfaced quietly. Michelle caught herself pulling back, overanalyzing words, preparing for disappointment. Old wounds whispered warnings. She remembered how easily things could fall apart, how trust could be misplaced. One evening, she almost canceled their plans, overwhelmed by doubt. Instead, she went, and in doing so, she realized fear didn't have to decide for her. Healing, she understood, wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward anyway. Michelle began prioritizing herself in ways she never had before. She set boundaries. She rested without guilt. She pursued interests she once postponed. The realization came softly. Her happiness didn't depend on anyone else. Love could add to her life, but it wasn't the foundation. For the first time, she felt grounded. Whole? Months later, Michelle walked through the city with steady confidence. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She smiled more. She slept better. She felt present. At 40, she hadn't found an ending. She had found a beginning one, built on self-respect, courage, and quiet joy. And that, she knew, was more than enough.